Hey guys, imagine a whole century where one trading company slowly takes over a massive country full of kings, warriors, and ancient cultures. From 1800 to 1900, India went through crazy changes under British control that still shape it today. Get ready for the wild ride. It's pretty intense. All right, so let's kick this off right at the start of the 1800s. Back then, the British East India Company wasn't just trading anymore. They were acting like they owned the place. After winning big in battles like Plassey earlier, they kept pushing out. Look, they fought the Maratha Empire in a bunch of wars, and by 1818, they pretty much knocked them down for good. That opened the door for the British to control huge chunks of central and western India. Yeah, so they used their army, made deals with some local rulers, and played different Indian powers against each other. Do not let that fool you. It wasn't fair play. They had better guns, training, and cash from taxes they squeezed out of the land. Here is the thing. Places like Bengal were already under their thumb, and they kept expanding north and south. Soldiers marched, treaties got signed, and whole regions lost their freedom bit by bit. People in villages felt the pressure with higher taxes and changes in how farming worked. Okay, so this set up the whole century of control. The company built roads and started messing with local laws, too. That is a big deal, because it changed everyday life for millions. Honestly, Indian kings and fighters tried to push back, but the British kept coming with more power. Pretty wild, right? How a business turned into basically a government. They took over more states through something called the Doctrine of Lapse later on, saying if a ruler died without a son, the land went to them. Man, that caused so much anger. Villages saw old ways disappear while British officers got rich. Look, this early push made the company super strong by the 1830s. They controlled most of the big trade and army. Yeah, the foundation for everything that came after got laid right here in those first decades. Okay, so by the 1830s and 40s, things got even more intense. The British started changing Indian society big time. All right, they banned stuff like sati, pushed English in schools, and tried to make things more modern their way. Look, governors like Lord Dalhousie were all about annexing more land. They grabbed states like Oudh and others using excuses. Yeah, so the company kept fighting wars too. The Anglo-Sikh Wars in the 1840s were brutal and ended with the British taking Punjab. That was huge because the Sikhs had a strong kingdom. Here's the thing, these moves made a lot of Indians mad because their traditions and rulers were getting pushed aside. Real talk, railways got built, telegraph lines went up, and trade boomed for the British. But regular people faced hard times with famines and heavy taxes. Do not let that fool you. Some changes, like ending some old practices, helped, but it came with total disrespect for local culture. Okay, so education spread in English, which created a new group of Indians who knew British ways but still loved their own country. That later helped spark new ideas. Pretty wild. Right, how building roads and schools could also feel like control. The company army had tons of Indian soldiers called sepoys who started feeling the pressure too. Lower pay, bad treatment, and rumors about losing their religion. Man, tension was building everywhere. Yeah, by the mid-1800s, the British controlled most of India, either directly or through friendly princes. This whole period showed how fast things were changing, and how unhappy a lot of people were getting. That is a big deal because it all exploded soon after. All right, so here comes the massive turning point, the 1857 rebellion. Look, it started in Meerut when Indian sepoys refused new rifle cartridges that were greased with stuff that insulted both Hindus and Muslims. Yeah, so they rose up, marched to Delhi, and brought back the old Mughal Emperor as a symbol. Here is the thing. It wasn't just soldiers. Farmers, kings, and regular folks joined in places like Kanpur, Lucknow, and Jhansi. Real talk. Leaders like Rani Lakshmibai fought like legends, charging into battle. The British got caught off guard and lost control in big areas for months. Okay, so battles were bloody on both sides with terrible killings. Do not let that fool you. The rebels had early wins, but the British brought in more troops from outside and used better organization to crush it by 1858. Pretty wild, right? How one rumor about cartridges lit the fire for a huge uprising against years of built-up anger over land grabs, taxes, and cultural disrespect. Yeah, whole cities got wrecked and thousands died. The rebellion showed how deep the resentment went after decades of company rule. Man, it changed everything after that. Yeah, so after the rebellion got put down, the British made huge changes. All right, they ended the East India Company completely. Look, in 1858, the British government took direct control. This is the start of the British Raj. Here is the thing. Queen Victoria made a proclamation promising respect for Indian religions and customs. Real talk, they reorganized the army so more British soldiers were in charge and fewer sepoys from certain groups. Okay, so a viceroy now ran India for the crown. Do not let that fool you. It was still all about British power, but they tried to be smarter about it. That is a big deal, because it moved from company greed to official empire rule. Pretty wild. Right, how one big revolt forced the most powerful country in the world to switch up their whole system. Yeah, they built more infrastructure, but also tightened control. Indians started organizing more too. Okay, so the second half of the century under direct crown rule was mixed. Look, railways expanded like crazy, connecting the country, but mostly to ship resources back to Britain. Here is the thing. Cash crops replaced food farming in many places, which led to horrible famines that killed millions. Real talk. People suffered while British businesses made bank. All right, by the 1880s, educated Indians started groups like the Indian National Congress in 1885 to push for more rights and say in government. Yeah, so early leaders wanted reforms, not full freedom yet, but it planted the seeds. Do not let that fool you. British rule brought some modern stuff, but at a huge cost to local industries and pride. Pretty wild, right? How towards 1900 you see the start of the independence movement growing stronger. Man, that century from 1800 to 1900 turned India from a land of many kingdoms into a big colony, and the fight back was just getting started.